G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for today's episode of WAFL Watch, where the WAFL Eagles fought hard across four quarters after being blown out of the water early by West Perth. For today's episode, I'll be covering a brief overview of the game, who the best players were, including best AFL listed talent, promising performances, and best WAFL listed players, and then my key takeaways from the match before finally my predictions for who is pushing for a spot in the AFL side next week. So the game was a pretty scrappy contest, especially early at Sullivan Logistics Oval, which must have been drenched during the day and looked like a game of polo had been played before the footy started, as my wife put it when she poked her nose in and looked at the oval. There were sections of churned up mud across several parts of the oval. The use of the ball was ugly from both sides, especially early. So I think that the rain must have just been away for a while and the ground dried up a little bit. But the conditions suited us less than West Perth, looking at the way we wanted to move the ball. And then on top of that, we were running with a bit of a skeleton midfield compared to most weeks. So West Coast fielded 14 AFL listed players, which is 3 less than last week, despite us having no injuries, which did leave me a little bit dubious about the AFL squad lining up against Port tomorrow, because it looks like we're withholding all 3 emergencies before that match, which is unusual. I'm more familiar with just one travelling emergency, but it looks like Tom Gross, Noah Long, and Jack Williams are all being kept out of the packet for some reason. Anyway, like I said, it was a bit of a skeleton midfield with Tim Kelly leading the way alongside the WAFL-listed Shannon Lacasson, and then more of a part-time rotation through the middle for other guys. And I think the result of some of those stable mids missing from the squad was that some very quick scoring happened at the other end from West Perth, just during different patches of the game. We did manage to mount a few really big fight backs, and we got within 3 goals a couple of times. That was after they had a really big 6-goal first quarter, which is one of those really quick patches of goals that I was talking about. But we did end up getting pushed back every time, and we lost respectably, with a few really impressive individual performances, in my opinion. And at the top of those impressive performances was Tim Kelly. After a really quiet 2025 all up, I think Kelly was easily our best after being dropped back to the WAFL. And the reason I find that really exciting is because the first time that he was sent back to the twos, I actually didn't really think he did a whole lot to warrant his recall back into the side. There didn't seem to be any circuit breaker that he's clearly needed to come back into the AFL just with form and fresh energy. And I can't say if he'll walk straight back into the squad against Richmond next week, but at least this time he looks like he's found that spark that's been missing. Yes, I know it's only been 1 week, but it just looked very different out there. In the first half, where nobody handled the footy well due to the wet, he was our cleanest ball user. And as the game wore on, quarter by quarter, he just looked more and more damaging while racking up the possessions, finishing with 27 disposals and 2 goals. Really good goals too, by the way. My second best out there was someone I really wasn't expecting this from, but Callum Jamieson was enormous for us down back. It was a bit of a WAFL Jeremy McGovern performance, and he ate up almost every high ball that West Perth sent inside 50. He finished with 8 marks, and almost all of them would have been crucial intercepts, I think. Like I said, I wasn't really expecting much from Jamieson this season after all the time that he's had off, but he's looking really strong as yet another one of our towering key defenders who's emerging as another depth option for the AFL if we need him. Third best for me was Jack Petruccelli. He might be out of favour with the AFL selection panel, but he's actually really consistent for us every week in the WAFL. And he really hurt West Perth tonight in the wet. It wasn't just his speed either. He's really physical in the contest and was hitting targets all night in wet conditions, finishing with 24 disposals. And the last on my list to round out my top 4 is Bo Allen, who finished with 16 disposals, but was an absolute weapon with every one of them. I know we've seen him do it by now, all of us, but his ability to cut directly through opposition just in this perfectly straight line towards goal still really catches me off guard when he gets going. He's both a metres gained player and a line breaker that continually open the field up for us beyond just that zone that West Perth set up. I wasn't actually expecting him to be dropped actually at all last week, but hopefully it's not for long and we see him back in the AFL side quickly. From our promising players, the top promising performance tonight was Jacob Newton. So for anyone who doesn't know, Newton was our second pickup at the mid-season draft. So while it's very easy to overlook his existence on our list, he's got some really exciting AFL traits, in my opinion. He's a one-grab player who's really dynamic with the ball in hand and a great finisher. He put the first goal of the game on the board with a really great tackle inside 50 and then a really clean conversion. I think he's a bit unlucky being drafted into a really deep part of our list as a small forward. But when the time does come, it'll be really exciting to see him play at the highest level because I'm confident he's up to it. I wouldn't expect it to be this year. It's possible, but I wouldn't expect it, just with, like I said, the depth that we have in that part of the ground. The other promising performance is a bit of a special mention in Harry Barnett, who had his best game of this year. He started finding himself just in the right positions at the right time, using his height and pulling down a couple of huge marks. One was right in front of goal to set up a really important goal for us. So hopefully he builds this form for the rest of the season, just because it's been a bit of a slow run-up for Harry Barnett in his third season now. Our best WAFL listed players were Shannon Lacasson, who was easily our best WAFL listed player for the match and probably top 5 in the first half at least. He finished with 19 disposals, but importantly, he was really busy early when the rest of the side was struggling to get a grip of West Perth in the wet. Orion Kerr, I hope I got that name right because I haven't seen him before, but he was our highest goal scorer with 3 tonight, while Josh Burke had another impressive night up forward, kicking multiple goals for the second week in a row. Anyway, that takes me to the key takeaways. And my first key takeaway from the match was that our key defence stocks have risen a bit unexpectedly this year. So after plucking Sandy Brock out of the supplemental selection period over summer, that's the SSP that they always refer to in acronyms, he's turned into a pretty handy key defender who's just been nudged out of the AFL 23 by Rhett Bazzo, who I've also been saying for a month now is really beginning to demand that opportunity. So I was glad to see him brought in. But then now Callum Jamison's emerged tonight as another layer of AFL-capable depth that should hopefully mean that we never experience anything like what happened in 2023 again. I'm not sure if anyone remembers, but there was a patch that year when both Gov and Barras were both out injured, and Harry Edwards hadn't been uninjured all year. It was always something. I think he broke his wrist at training when he was just back from some other injury. So he was already unavailable to step in, and what resulted was just a handful of games in a row where key forwards like Tex Walker, Charlie Kerner, I know there were others, were kicking 10 goals against us without breaking a sweat. You roll forward a couple of years to now, and Harry Edwards has had the breakout year that we're all hoping for, and some, while Rhett Bazzo has worked his way into the side, displacing what I'd call a competent Sandy Brock, who controlled the skies in the WAFL tonight against West Perth alongside Cal Jamison. I think that you're looking really at decent numbers before that really last line of key defender that we really didn't have not so long ago. And despite losing Gov to retirement and Barras to what I think was a pretty decent trade. My second key takeaway is something I mentioned earlier in this video, which is keep an eye out for late changes tomorrow before first bounce against Port. It's more of a hunch than anything I'm confident in, but like I said, I'm not used to us preserving all 3 of our emergencies, and the WAFL side tonight was deprived of Tom Gross, Noah Long and Jack Williams, who would have shaped a very different WAFL side, which does make the second difficult week in a row to predict who will be coming in and out of the AFL 23. Although I will pat myself on the back for calling that there would be 4 changes last week. Got that one right. I think I got all the players right except for Tyrell Dewar because he was off my radar with his brief injury. But my predictions to begin, firstly, I have no problem with him getting more than a single week in the twos to get comfortable again for the AFL, but I do think Tim Kelly belongs at the top of this list for the call up to the AFL next week. He was good enough tonight, and then the experience as an expected AFL player does put him at the front of the queue. Next up, I think, is Bo Allen. Between his performance tonight and just clear AFL traits, it would make sense for him to get back in there. It's really going to depend on, I suppose, how the team plays against Port tomorrow, really. And then other than those 2, it's, like I said, really hard to predict the changes because of the 3 emergencies who were held. I'd say that it's unlikely that the 3 players who are closest to the AFL side, being those guys, are going to get caught up after having a week off, but you never really know. Sandy Brock is the taller option over Bazzo if we were to be worried about height when we come up against Richmond, which we shouldn't be, with Tom Lynch suspended forever. And their other key tall stocks are pretty medium. But I think it's really between those guys I've mentioned and the emergencies, which pretty much wraps up tonight's edition of WAFL Watch. I hope everyone enjoyed the coverage. And as always, if you're watching this and you're not already a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button as I put out these WAFL and AFL reviews every round. And I'm looking forward to getting stuck into some draft content also later in the year. Otherwise, as always, thank you for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you all again for tomorrow night's review of a big upset win over Port. Until then,